Welcome to the Bob O Show. My name is Bob Opotzner. I'm an attorney in Danbury, Connecticut. I'm a litigator who does a lot of work in the family law area. And today's show is going to be talking about family law and mental health professional, in this case, who was going to talk about how people deal with certain issues in their marriages. But before I get into today's show, I want to do just to close the circle on my show last week, which was with attorney Rachel Levine, involving her work as a member of the board of directors of the Ann Courtney Foundation, which focuses upon people who are raised in foster homes. And then once they get out of the age of being available for foster homes, trying to help people who need help and need assistance after they've reached age 18. And I went last night to a fundraiser as an invited guest by Attorney Levine, and I was just so moved by the speakers who spoke about their history. One is now a school counselor in Washington, Waterbury. Another one is going to law school. And it's just amazing the kind of work that's done. And so I hope people learn from the show that we present on the Bobby O Show, different aspects of life that maybe we don't know that much about. And so I want to thank Rachel Levine for that activity and that involvement. Now, today's show, we have a mental health professional whose name is Kelly Hopkins-Alvarez, who's going to talk about something called discernment counseling and other aspects of trying to help people who are in the throes of potentially getting divorced or other activities, thinking about how she should move forward with themselves and their spouse. Kelly, how are you?
I'm wonderful. Thanks so much for having me on today.
It is my pleasure. We did our prep show, Getting Some Pizza, last week, which was very good. I like that kind of prep show. Kelly, just tell us, you're welcome. Tell you a little bit about your background so that people can understand who you are. And then I have a lot of questions for you on your mental health professional working.
Sure. Original background was in education. I had a certified school counseling background and education as an elementary ed teacher, which actually started to get my ideas about going into the mental health profession. So since 2009, I've been a licensed professional counselor. My specialty is working with couples. I would say it's my passion.
And you have a great passion, as people will find out today. As I told you in our prep, I was on the Board of Education for 15 years. Initially, when I was only 24 years old, when I grew up in Shelton, Connecticut, I was on the Board of Ed in Shelton for 9 years, and 6 years I was on in Richfield. I moved to Richfield. And it's interesting you mentioned that you were school counseling, because when I was 23, 24 years of age on the Board of Education, you had a guidance counselor. And that's what most schools had in the early 80s, guidance counselors, and that's about it. And they did everything. And now schools have many, many different types of professionals who help children, who help parents who need help in the family. Tell me, please, a little bit about what the focus, if there is a focus, of your practice. What do you do specifically that you are most passionate about?
I love that question. Thank you, because quite often I'm trying to really distill what I do. My main passion is really working with couples. Since I originally was focused on kids, I say that in my work with couples, I'm still really accomplishing my goal of helping kids, because when their parents are not doing well, when their marriage is at an impasse, things flow negatively down towards the kids. So even though I started to get really interested and curious about the big kids, I call it, I've been married for 33 years and have 2 girls, age 28 and 18. I've always been curious and interested and an advocate for kids, but I really over the years became more focused on couples. So when they come here, they're generally at an impasse. There are several different negative cycles occurring: communication, money, sex/intimacy, time, chores, and there's more. And my role is to really have them have conversations differently. And we'll talk a little bit about a unique type of couple that finds their way into my practice today, the discernment counseling clients.
You use a very important word, and those of us who are old enough to know the Groucho Marx show, when the duck would come down if a certain word were mentioned, you mentioned the word communications, and the duck came down in my home office, because that's such a critical thing. And I think parents, from my practice, unfortunately, if they're getting to the divorce field or thinking about getting divorced or ending the marital relationship, they sometimes get so wrapped up in what they are doing that they forget that there are children involved people are immensely impacted by what's happening. And it's the saddest to me is when you see a 9 or 10, 11-year-old child who's the parent in the relationship. Do you have any comment about that?
Well, of course, we have a term for that in the field, parentifying. Simply said, it's really someone who's at a different developmental age from the parents that really cannot manage, absorb, understand the adult problems. And many times they start to become symptomatic. And we know what that means. Stomach aches, headaches for little kids, behavior issues, older kids have their own set of challenges. So my goal is to get partners talking, whether they are in couples therapy, discernment counseling, which is our focus today, or I also do co-parenting counseling and help with non-adversarial divorce. So my ultimate goal is to get the two people that are in front of me who generally have kids fostering their communication in a different way, because they have to communicate for the rest of their life together. At minimum, I always say that they're going to be co-grandparents, whether they're married, separated, or divorced.
I often tell my clients who are having arguments over the children, and I'm at the stage of my career where if someone's going to argue that I want to have 5 more minutes of time with the child or children because he or she has more time, I say, wait a minute, the key is this. If you've got young kids, when they get married, if they get married, do they invite you both to the wedding? Do they invite you both to the wedding? Or if they graduate from high school, you're sitting next to each other or not, and what you're doing in your activities is to try to help people be better parents, and in the meantime, also trying to help the people help themselves. You mentioned discernment counseling. I've used that word a few times. Can you please tell me what precisely is your perspective on what discernment counseling is? And then I'm going to follow it up with how that differs from what I'm more familiar with until I met you, is marriage counseling. So let's talk about discernment counseling first of all.
Usually I will do this. So discernment counseling is there's a leaning in person and there's a leaning out person. Discernment counseling is not couples therapy. It is a very short-term process, usually up to 7 sessions. They're very intensive. The first session is 150 minutes generally. Follow-ups are usually 120. So basically the marriage is in the ER. And when anyone is in the ER, they can't stay there that long. They're going to progress out of the hospital or into ICU. So discernment is for those couples where one person has decided, there are many reasons behind the decision, that they no longer want to work on the marriage, or they're just unsure of what to do. And so they technically would not qualify to be couples therapy clients, because to be a couples therapy client, you kind of want the medicine or the treatment. They're both really kind of lost in the problems, but they both unify around the fact that they want the medicine. Discernment counseling is deciding, the couple is deciding, generally one person in the couple, the leaning out partner, is deciding, will I take the medicine of couples therapy? So that's something that they're weighing.
I've gone through your discernment counseling packet. As Candy Ann knows, who's my director and my guest now, I do a lot of preparation for these sessions. And I really like the fact that in your What is Discernment Counseling, you have a phrase that says, it's a way for partners to carefully pause and look at the relationship options. And then you talk about how it's different from couples therapy. And I think the pause is a very interesting perspective, because the court system in Connecticut, if you want to get divorced, it's now changed in the last few years because of non-adversarial divorces, but you typically need to have 90 days, which we used to call the cooling off period, between when the divorce papers were filed and when you could get a divorce judgment. And even though it's changed a little bit in that perspective, it still was the concept of taking the opportunity to say, really, do I want to get out of the marriage? And your perspective, I thought is very useful, saying that it's a pause. I like that phrase very much in your packet book.
Well, thank you. Generally, when they're coming into my office, not always, but generally, there's some instability in their marriage and in the home. So the pause is helping them to not roll forward, one person to roll forward with any decisions, because they're not in a good place. There aren't the normal communication patterns between them. So how can two distressed individuals solve their problem of what path they're going to take going forward? So the pause is very, very useful. I'm helping them in their coping mechanisms. I'm learning if they're sleeping properly, if they're eating. I'm trying to help stabilize the home environment with the kids all along while the marriage is in the ER, helping them to get in a better mind state to make the decision as to what they're going to do in their marriage.
I have a routine I use in my divorce consultation. People come in, I get a phone call, and people say, I've got your name from so-and-so, and I want to talk to you. And I usually do a consultation that lasts about an hour and a half. It's a pretty intense consultation. We charge for the consultation, but some people do it for free, which I think is not a greatest idea, because I think you want your lawyer to be very thoughtful in the analysis to help you decide what to do in your marriage. And I will often suggest to my potential client that maybe if you don't have some mental health professional working with you, maybe you should get some counseling, some ideas, because once you file those divorce papers, it changes the whole dynamic of the relationship. It's very, very hard to pull back. And in talking to people, it's interesting to me when we spoke the other day, and as I've read your paperwork, you have that leaning analysis, which is one wants to lean in and one wants to lean out maybe. I always ask that question at the initial consultation. Where do you think you are in your marriage process? And sometimes people say, well, I want to get divorced yesterday. Mm-hmm. Some will say, I just want information. And others talk about, well, I really wish we could do better in our marital relationship. So it's interesting to me. I can understand more easily two people saying, let's discuss these issues and find out, why it is that that you used to drink all the time and now you don't. You're not the same party person you were, and you're trying to work together. But to get a couple to have one person say, I want out. I don't want to do this anymore. Yet that person gets, I don't want to say the word persuaded, but gets perhaps encouraged by your discussion to go through this 5 to 7 initial sessions to talk about trying to work things out. Can you discuss how that works and how you help people who are reluctant to get involved in this discernment process?
Well, the leaning out person is sometimes the person that seeks me out. Sometimes it's their partner who really wants to save the marriage. If there is someone hesitant, sometimes the leaning in person is hesitant to come in. They don't like the fact that part of discernment is exploring a path towards separation or divorce. So generally, I will ask them, what is their best alternative to doing this process at this time? That question tends to really sit heavy on them because in many cases, they've gone to couples therapy. In some of those instances, it really wasn't couples therapy. One partner joined their partner's individual therapy session, and that never really goes very well because that's already an established therapeutic rapport. So when they're exploring what do we do next, trying to organize and be able to have conversations is necessary to determine the 3 steps, which is, do we want to remain in the status quo of our marital patterns and our negative cycles? And we hope we can rule that out with the couple to say, well, the status quo is pretty difficult to remain in because usually they've been in it for a number of years before coming in. Do you want to talk about a healthy structured separation or divorce? Or do you want to talk about moving to 6 months of couples therapy with divorce off the table and an all-out effort to save the marriage? The main focus of discernment is helping each of them look at their own roles and how the dynamic formed. And we also help them create something. The main body of work of discernment is something called a personal agenda for change, where I'm working with each member of the couple, not as an individual therapist, but as sort of an agent of the relationship temporarily, if you will, and helping them create a list of things now that they can do to work on themselves. We don't have permission as therapists to work on the marriage because we don't have 2 people that are agreeing to do it. What we do have is that they both agreed that they're in a negative control pattern. They have this impasse, and they are willing to look at how they're doing now and what things they can work on for themselves.
I was interested by the fact that you often recommend, I don't know if it's always, I think it's often was the word I think I read in your paperwork, that the people in the discernment counseling group also may consider getting their own therapist if they don't have one already to deal with issues about him or herself. Can you talk about that a little bit, please?
Yes, that's one of the reasons why prior couples therapy failed. We are therapists. We love to validate you. We love to hear your story. We love to hear your family of origin trauma. And all of those things are very important. But couples therapy, we know that in many cases, couples therapy doesn't really work for some if one person's issues are being focused on. So if each person is working on their own issues, it sort of sets a new idea in these partners' minds that, wow, if we did go to couples therapy, it could be quite different. There could be accountability. There can be structure. There can be goals that are created that each person is accountable for. And myself, as either the discernment counselor role or couples therapy role, I'm asking the questions about following up for accountability and asking their partners to please kind of just take a step back and let me do my thing. And it's quite interesting when people realize that at minimum, they can look at how they've functioned in this relationship and how they might function in a future one. I get them curious. If you do leave this marriage without learning about how you function in a relationship, higher marriages have have higher than 1 in 2 rates of divorce. Tends to get them very interested.
Kelly, as an attorney in this field, I always joke with the fact that we attorneys are amateur psychologists. But I also believe that a good lawyer, a good accountant, good whatever expert field you have, you know what you don't know. And even though I may be an, quote, amateur psychologist, unquote, I often recommend to my clients who aren't sure what they want to do in the marriage or are having their own personal issues, that if they don't have a therapist, they should get one, because better to have one at the start of your process so that if a crisis does come later on, you have someone to talk to. And in your discussion a few moments ago, you mentioned counseling, which I think is a great idea because we both agree on that one. But number two, what's going on in the future? And except in the unique situation where there might be physical abuse or mental abuse, typically speaking, if any relationship breaks down, whether you're married, not married, dating for 6 months, whatever, it's very infrequent, in my opinion, except for their unique case, that it's all the other person's fault. And that it's very important to find out, what is it about me that made this relationship not work out, so that the next relationship, if I'm the same pain in the neck that I was before, maybe the second marriage or second relationship will fall apart as well. And I think you were hinting at that kind of concept in your analysis. Am I correct?
Yes. And that's what actually helps to bring people who are sort of hesitant to come into this process into the process. They tend to really like the individual sessions with the discernment counselor. It's one-on-one time, sort of reviewing. A main question of discernment is, what have you done to try to repair the marriage? And sometimes people will look at me like a deer in the headlights, and it hits them hard, some of the questions that we're trained to ask them. So we're also trained as discernment counselors that both members of the couple created the dynamic, the negative dynamic. It doesn't necessarily mean that the creation was equal. And that helps the other partner who says, but they have a substance abuse issue and they have this mental health issue. It sort of covers that base that it's not always equal, but both of you created it.
Well, one of the interesting things to me is that you have one leaning in and one leaning out. Can you just it's not going to be the detailed question, but let's suppose I'm there with you at a session and, I'm saying, I'm here because my wife made me come. I really don't want to go. I'm done, blah, 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 that kind of thing. What might you say to, I'll use the word encourage. Maybe you might use a different word to say, Bob, maybe you feel that way, but this can be helpful to you. How might you address the person who's reluctant or doesn't think it's worthwhile, but I'm doing it for her, I'm doing it for him?
I cannot tell you how often I hear this question. So thank you for asking this. It happens a great deal. And I let the person know that it's nice of you that you've come on the request of your partner in order to stay here, in order to stay in the process, because there's so many people that really do need this help in the community. We have to really be available to the other couples that need this care, that each person really does need something to work on. And I'm gentle with them. discernment is when you come in together in the sessions, you're together for the first 30 minutes and 20 to 30 minutes. And then sort of the leaning out person, I'll keep in my session room first, and I'll direct the other member of the couple to the waiting room, and I'll give them some things to do. So generally I'm working with them on that individually, and sooner than later, they will start to talk about things that they are not happy with in the relationship. They weren't as unhappy as the other partner, as the leaning out partner. They said, things aren't great. I never thought we'd be here. So I have to really meet each client where they are. And that is something I really hope to do, because I've been married a long time. I understand what happens in a relationship. And I want to let them know that if they want to do the work, I'm going to help them, even if they can't figure out what they need. If ultimately after that time, they really still feel like they're only here to support their partner, I probably would let them know that we'd have to kind of pump the brakes on having session number 2, because discernment is not about helping one person. There's no patient, right? There's two people the couple is the client. Does that make sense? But there's two halves of the client. Does that make sense?
It makes a lot of sense at all. Very much makes sense. And you said something also, and as we're talking, we had prepared and discussed what we're going to do in the show. And of course, I said to you, I very rarely follow any kind of script. When I do my trial notebook, I do for every trial, I have all these different outlines of what I'm going to do. I don't usually look at them during the hearing because things change. And then I go back and check these things out. But no divorce is a cookie cutter. And people think, oh, I'm going to get divorced. It's no big deal. It's no problem, whatever. They go to see you as a discernment counselor or someone for marriage counseling or other mental health professional. People don't often understand how different every case is. And we always look at it from my perspective. You and I have toolboxes, and we may have a screwdriver and a pliers and whatever, but every case requires different implementation of the tools to help us try to achieve a result in this matter, which leads me to the discernment counseling can help. And in your outline that I did read, of course, you listed certain things, and I want to hit a few of those points with you. And maybe if you want to comment on any particular point as we go through it, there's about 6 different points. You say discernment counseling can help. 1, it says understand with clarity why the relationship is where it is. Can you elaborate on that, please? That
is our number 1 task as discernment counselors. Discernment counselors, Dr. Bill Doherty, who created the model, still trains us every month. We're in cohorts of, discernment counselors around the world. And he says the main thing is for us to help couples gain clarity and confidence on what the next steps are.
What's a cohort, by the way? What's a cohort?
Oh, a cohort.
I know what it is, but
Thank you. It's basically a group. It's like a team. It's like a team that's focused on a certain issue. In this case, it's the discernment counseling team.
Okay. The next thing on your list of many is identify when your unsolved negative marital cycle is blocking you from communicating and or co-parenting. Please.
In lieu of just blaming your partner for the issue at hand, since 2 of you created the dynamic, it's important to begin to help the couple transition their language to say, this is the dynamic that gets us stuck. Rather than you're the problem, it's because of your mother's influence on us. It's because of your ADHD or your learning issue, rather than this is the exact thing that we both need to work on. This cycle takes us down every time.
Go ahead, finish.
Trying to get them to align together to start to look at their own impact. I always say we can't have sort of an angel in the room. There is no angel that comes in to discernment counseling that hasn't had any impact on the negative cycle. Everyone
I was going to tie into one of the items on your list, which is looking at both sides of the problems. Some of us, I could be accused of it as well, feel the world revolves around me, right? It revolves around me. And sometimes people don't understand, I want you to go watch a Duke. I'm a big Duke basketball fan, and Yale also by 2 of my schools. And maybe the spouse doesn't want to go to the Duke basketball game, the Yale basketball game, but maybe the spouse wants to go to see the great tenor sing. I don't like the great tenor. So maybe what you think about is, well, maybe we can find a way to talk about, we'll go to the Duke game first or a second, and we'll go see Bocelli, the tenor, or whatever I'm using as an example, so that you are sharing different perspectives. Any comments about that?
Oh my gosh, that is a key basic structure that a healthy couple needs to be able to share perspectives. In fact, if they were in couples therapy, one of the stages of emotionally focused couples therapy is to sort of take a walk in your partner's shoes. See what it would be like for them if you went to Andrea Bocelli or if you went to the game. It's really not about the game or Andrea Bocelli. It's about the connection. And when couples get to discernment counseling, the connection is not strong. You know, when we were setting up for this today, I'm trying to make sure that, you know, my Wi-Fi everything will work properly. A couple who doesn't spend any time and prioritize the relationship, their Wi-Fi signal's very, very low.
When we had our pizza meeting, I had mushroom, you had pepperoni, and I took a piece of your pepperoni, took a piece of my mushroom, and it didn't hurt so badly to have a different perspective. But that's a kind of a silly analogy to the point where there's some give and take.
Yeah.
We only have 2 minutes left in the show, and I told you that 28 minutes goes very quickly. So I want to give you a minute to sort of summarize where you are and maybe even lead us so that we have a trailer for our next show. How about that?
I would love to. The fact that you covered this model, it makes me very happy, because when couples are at an impasse, it's a very nuanced place. There's so many layers, and the layers have built up over time. One of the main things I'm trying to encourage couples to do is to slow down. By the time they've come here, they're at a rapid pace, or one person is, and they're not in a good place to make decisions. So my main goal is to have people be heard and to encourage them to take the time that they need to see what the future of their relationship will be, and to not take a lot of information from family and friends. This relationship was built by them, and ultimately what happens has to be prioritized by them. So
Kelly, thank you so very much. I want to tell you, you tie in, there's a guest on my show many times, Michelle Phillips, who wrote a book called Happiness is a Habit. And you should read this book because it goes through a lot of things that you talk about. And as people try to deal with their problems, making themselves happier on the inside may make the relationship better on the outside. Kelly, it was a pleasure having you, and I'll have you back again. This has been Bob Opotzner on The Bobby O Show. Kelly, be well.
Thank you.